Good afternoon. My name's Tim Robey. I'm going to be talking to Andrew today. I hope you've been having a great festival so far. Hopefully, it's about to get even better. Such a privilege for me to introduce a filmmaker we're very lucky to have. I think one of our best, in fact, and I don't think it's premature to say that, especially not if you've seen his most recent film, All of Us Strangers, which really consolidates everything that we know he can do so well. Many of you won't have seen that film quite yet, but we've got an hour to explore his career to date before that with some clips. And I'm going to just bring it on. Let's have it. So without further ado, give a very warm welcome to Andrew Haigh.
Thank you.
I tried to get the slightly embarrassing, gushy bit out of the way before you get on stage.
Yeah, I feel embarrassed.
Sorry. So, Andrew, welcome back to the London Film Festival. The very first time we ever met was at the festival, 2011, which was when you had Weekend here, which was really a landmark film, a film that made a huge impact on me, and I'm sure lots of people here. And that's in a moment that will be our first clip. But before we play it, can you fill us in on the kind of the Andrew Haigh story up to Weekend? So, tell us
birth, or
yeah, birth.
Where shall I?
Tell us just a little bit about where you grew up and maybe your first steps into filmmaking or what inspired that.
Yeah, I grew up. I was born in Yorkshire, but grew up in just outside Croydon, a place called Sanderstead. I didn't ever think, I guess, that making films was anything that would be my life. So it took me a very long time to work out it was even a possibility. I went to university, studied history. I didn't do film studies or anything, and then I started working in the industry as a runner. I worked at Merchant Ivory for about a year. Sort of found my way into assistant editing. I was an assistant editor for a while, and I did that for probably about 15 years.
With Ridley Scott a little bit?
Yeah, I worked on like Gladiator and Black Hawk Down and a bunch of those kind of big films just in the cutting room. And I did that for a while, and I knew I was starting to work out at that time that I wanted to make films. But the idea of it was so terrifying, I think. I thought first of all, I didn't think I'd be able to do it. But also just the idea of then having to get on set and then having to tell people what to do and make decisions, it was too much for me. But so I slowly started to kind of build up confidence. Made some very, very short films by myself, pretty much, just with nobody else. And then I'd been working for a while, and I got so tired of not making anything. And there were a bunch of American filmmakers that were doing very, very micro-budget films at the time, like Joe Swanberg and Aaron Katz and Greta Gerwig, actually, back then, in some of her early stuff then. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to do something by myself. So I made a kind of a fiction documentary hybrid called Greek Pete that was about male escorts in London. And I thought, okay, I'm going to push it, because it's, there's quite a lot going on in that movie. Like, it's quite explicit and whatever. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to make this thing that scares me almost the most. And so I did that, and, it didn't really get released or anything necessarily, but I think it played in one cinema for like 2 days. But it did festival circuit, and I met a bunch of people, and then that led to Weekend, basically, which took a long time to get off the ground. No one wanted to pay for it. I think we made it for 100,000, I think is what it cost. But we shot it and everything for 65 with some money from EM Media. But, it's the usual story for filmmakers. You send it off and everyone rejects it and no one wants it. And you kind of understand because no one knew I hadn't done much. So, but finally someone believed in it and we made the film. And I think I never really thought... I wanted to just be as honest as I could in that film and say something about, I guess, a gay experience and how I felt about it. But I never really thought that anyone would actually see it. And in some strange way, that was kind of liberating. Because I thought, well, it might just be a few people that would see it. And then quite a lot of people did see it. So it was, and I was very happy that it sort of took off from there and got seen.
It's time to play a clip, one of my favourite scenes from Weekend, which has some certain resonances with the new film as well, which we might discuss in a minute. Let's play it.
Do you ever think about finding your parents?
No, not really.
Why not?
I don't really see the point. You know, I don't think it would change anything.
Why don't I pretend to be your dad and you can come out to me?
That is so weird.
Just ignore the fact that we've just had sex.
I don't think I can ignore the fact that we just
Come on,
had
try.
sex. Okay. Dad, I've got something that I need to tell you.
What's that?
I'm gay. I like guys, not girls.
Well, you know what, son? It doesn't matter to me. And I love you just the same. And guess what?
What?
I couldn't be more proud of you than if you were the first man on the moon.
I haven't seen that, I don't think, for like 10 years.
Really?
I don't think.
Wow.
I think I watched it in the premiere at South by Southwest, which, incidentally, if you're filmmakers here, you want your premiere to be really big and exciting. And I flew all the way to Texas to South by Southwest, and 5 minutes before the screening, there was one person in the audience. and when the screening happened, there was about 9 people in the audience. Luckily, 3 of them were from IFC, and they bought the film, so it was great. But it was a strange opening experience, that one.
It was one of those films that kind of bubbled up slowly, I think, into people's consciousness. But that scene has stayed with me almost more than anything else in the film, and certainly popped into my head a lot watching All of Us Strangers. But I want to ask you about actors and working with them, because it's the tiniest details of those 2 performances that really have stuck with me. It's plucking the little eyelash off his cheek, and the little thing Tom does with his shoulder, he keeps rolling it around. So being in a room with those actors and finding that scene with them, how do you know when you've hit it? How do you know when that take is it's a long shot when you've got it?
Yeah, I guess you just feel it. Like, sometimes in the script I'm quite detailed about actions and what someone might be doing with their hands and what they're picking up and what they're, doing. So sometimes that. But then on the day, I just want to let it feel like they're free to try whatever they want within the moment. It's kind of emotionally improvising, I suppose, rather than changing lines too much or that kind of thing. And then you just I don't shoot too much. I think we only did 4 takes of that. I mean, we shot the whole film in, 14 days, I think it was. So we didn't have much time. But you just, when you know that the actors understand the characters, then you hope that kind of those truthful moments come out. And then for me, it's just making sure I feel like I've captured them. And that is how long you keep the camera running for. It's like there's no cuts in that scene, obviously. And sometimes when there are no cuts, you keep elements that you would normally remove or pauses you would normally remove when you're editing more, reverse shot sequences. So it sometimes is how you edit just as much as what you get on the day and what details, start to appear.
And did it remind you of shooting a weekend when you shot some of the scenes between the 2 men in the new film? Because
it did. I think the new film is a kind of conversation with the first film. I was slightly scared when I was making the new film that people would be like, "Oh, it's Weekend with Ghosts," and I was like, "Oh god, that's not going to be good." And so I was nervous because I sort of thought that people, would be like, "Well, I really like that first film, and he's ruined that somehow with this." But it was always about taking things. I mean, look, 10 years has gone by, and I'm 10 years older, and the characters the lead in my film is older, is my age. So I wanted to tell it from things from slightly different perspectives. So there are similarities and connections with this film rather than it being directly related to it.
Or a sequel.
Yeah,
exactly. Obviously, it did open doors, and I think for someone who's made a film that's had that kind of impact, some people might move to television straight away, some people might develop their next film. You sort of did both. Your next project, which we're going to have a clip from, is the HBO series Looking. So, good Looking fans.
Or one of you.
And I've deliberately picked a clip which has as many people in it as possible.
Yeah.
So we've gone from like two guys in a bed to like a big gay party with a huge cast and like cool music, more of a panoramic vision of gay life, I suppose.
Yeah.
But what was it like developing that with HBO? And did you find you had to sort of relinquish a certain amount of control over things, or were you happy with the amount that you kept during it?
Yeah, it was a complicated one. They called me up, and it was basically just to direct the pilot originally. I didn't create the show; someone else created the show originally, and they were looking for me to direct the pilot. And I'd only just made Weekend, which was small and tiny, and I was like, okay, this feels like a good idea, and I liked the script. So I went over there. And they treat you well, like you fly business class, and you feel like, oh, it's exciting. And they put you in a nice hotel, and I met them all, and all the team and all the hundreds of people, and you go in the big offices. And then we made the pilot, and they liked it enough to pick it up. And then I kind of stayed on and became pretty much the showrunner, and directed a bunch of the episodes. But it was a weird one. It was so much bigger than I ever thought. Suddenly I'm going from something where you're just the actors are getting changed in the toilet, to walking down on the first day on set, and there's trailers everywhere and so many trucks and people. And then I got on set, and the first scene we shot, and all of the exec producers, it felt like 50 of them, however many it was, all sitting behind monitors watching. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And I shot this first scene, and it was awful. It was just we shot, it was oh God, it's not working. It just doesn't work. And they came over and started giving me notes. And I was like, I don't think I can do this. This is not going to work. And so then, I kind of feel like I'm some weird mixture of kind of quite shy and timid, and then crazily confident at exactly the same time. Because then that night I said to them, I can't work like this. If we want this to happen, I can't have any producers sitting on the set. You all need to be in a tent down the road. And if you've got notes, you can do them through the walkie-talkie to the AD, and then they can talk to me. And then they agreed to that, actually, and they did, and then it kind of became its own thing. But I loved working on the show. It was a really great experience, lots of interesting people, and I still see them, a lot of them now. But Russell Tovey came to my screening last night, and I've been in America, and all the actors came, and so we're really close. It was an important thing.
So let's set the scene. It's season 2, episode 1, and Jonathan Groff has just popped a pill and is about to go and disappear into a potty, basically. Lost in Music comes on, and I would put this clip on if I ever wanted to go out. It is a fantastic, joyful sequence. Can we play that clip, please?
Lost in
It's funny that because when Looking came out, it got like lots of criticism from parts of like the queer community that was really tough for us to take at the time. And so, and they were kind of, it was quite divisive, the thing. So then I thought, okay, so for season 2, I'm just going to have a massive big party in the woods with everybody from the community, all different types of people to say, fuck you. Like, so, I don't know, whether it didn't seem to work because the show still got cancelled, but still.
Well, I was going to ask about that. So 2 seasons probably a little bit earlier than HBO had hoped, but you managed to kind of tie it together by doing a kind of feature-length movie. Was that kind of fun to write, or was it a little bit sad to have to kind of close it all down?
To be honest, at the time, I was kind of done with it a little bit. I really enjoyed it, but it was 3 slightly complicated years of working, and it was great. It was a brilliant experience, but at the time, I knew it was going to be cancelled during the edit of the 2nd season, pretty much, we'd been kind of told. But they wrapped it up with like a final episode, and it was great, and we got to spend one more time in San Francisco with everybody. But, you know, I'd also, in the middle of that, I'd made 45 years, so it was a really, really busy time. I've been away from home a lot, so, I don't know, I was quite tired by the end of that. Like, I was editing in the break between season 1 and season 2, I shot 45 years, and then I was in the writer's room, writing in the morning, and then editing in the afternoon. So it was a busy time. Yeah.
And 45 years, I mean, the kind of tonal whiplash.
I think they're the same, aren't they?
So let's talk about that now. Back to two English people, very, very English people, talking in a kitchen over a cup of tea. But the clip we're going to see is the one where a kind of invisible chasm opens up between them for the first time in 45 years. I think we'll just play it straight away, and then we'll bounce off it in a sec.
What is it?
A letter.
Yes, I know, but from? It's in German.
Yeah.
What's it say?
Well, I can't remember the verbs as well as the nouns, but I think it says they found her.
Found who?
Well, her body, anyway.
God, who? Jeff?
They found Katya.
Oh.
You know who I'm talking about, don't you?
Of course.
I remember telling you, clear as day.
Of course I remember. I mean, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, and I know I told you about my Katya. She's been there over 50 years. Like something in the freezer. Now they found her. Like that Tolland man in the Swedish bog.
Danish, actually. It was on the curriculum for years. I taught it to the 3rd formers. I'll make some more tea.
One of my favourites for sure. I want to talk about the writing this time. This film is based on a short story. It's only about 12 pages long or something, David Constantine, which is just a sliver of a thing, and you obviously expanded it and fleshed it out, but it doesn't feel as though there's any meat on the film's bones. Every scene feels crucial. When Charlotte Rampling goes up into the attic to dig around and find all the sort of long-buried secrets, it's completely key. So can you talk about doing that kind of expansion, and also more generally, how do you like to write? Where do you write? When do you write?
Yeah,
how does it all work?
It was someone had sent. I'd made a short film before, and it was from this collection of short stories that I'd based it on, and then the publisher sent me a collection of David's stories, and I loved that. The original story I thought was great. The original story is told from the husband's perspective, not from the wife's perspective, and there's no wedding anniversary party, but the concept again is there, and I think that's what I like to find is a conceit that I feel like I can then hang my ideas on. And maybe it's because I'm not very good at finding the original conceits myself, but I find them in stories sometimes, and they just spark something interesting to me. And I'm always interested in time, and I'm interested in how things can shift so dramatically in such an instant, and memories can come back and they can haunt you and change things and disrupt relationships, and so it felt like a really good way to explore that. And I'd done Weekend, which felt like it was the start of something, a relationship, and then this became a possible end of a relationship or a long-term relationship, and I think that interests me the most, because I feel like you don't change as much as you think you do, and relationships remain complicated, and you have to work at them. And this was an example of kind of where a relationship starts to fray at the edges from something that's not even real. It's from so long ago. And so writing, I get anxious writing. It takes me a long time. And I get really excited about an idea, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be great. I love this. And then I start writing it, and then I think, oh my God, I can't write. Why have I done this? I'm the worst writer in the world. And then you panic and you think your career's over, and then you write again and you're like, well, maybe it's good. And then you go through that process about 5,000 times of like constantly doubting yourself. And I usually work at home, and then I can't do that anymore, so I have to go out and work somewhere else. And I do a lot of drafts, and there's a lot of dialogue in a lot of my films, and I work very hard at making them feel as naturalistic as I can, which takes a certain type of writing, I think. And so I spent a long time doing it, and then I shoot a fair amount, so there were always scenes. There was quite a lot of scenes in 45 years that I shot but didn't include in the film. And they're so strange, because sometimes they feel so important. There was one scene in 45 years that the people at the time at Film 4 were convinced that we needed a scene that Charlotte's character explains everything that she's feeling to her friend, to Dolly Wells's character, who doesn't appear that much in the movie now. There's a big scene, and I was like, I don't think we need it. I don't want it. But I wrote it, and I spent so long writing it, and it became the scene that drove me crazy. And then I shot it, and it was a whole 4-page scene. And then I shot it, and then we put it, the minute we assembled it in the edit, was like, hell no, that's coming straight out. But it's weird in writing. Sometimes you're writing for the film to be made, which is different from the film that you make. So you're writing to make execs, and I understand this as well, or actors or whoever it is, understand what it is that you're trying to say as a story. Even in the descriptions of how I do a scene, I'm forced sometimes to put more detail in than I would want to put in, knowing that it's for the read, not for the film. And I've just got used to that now, and it's fine. But, and then in the edit, you hone and you craft it and bring it down to its essence.
Your description of the self-censoring urge is really weirdly similar to what Greta Gerwig was saying last night at her one of these. She talks about having to get up super, super early and sneak out of bed to her computer and write before the little voices saying you're actually no good, and then she's kind of writing, they get up later.
It's true. It's very true. And it's funny because some people don't seem to have that. Some writers, and I don't get it. I don't understand it. And some directors don't seem to have that either. Although I think they probably do, they're just pretending. But I feel like it's just you can't be that confident in your abilities. I don't believe you can be. And I always want directors to get together and talk about how they feel when they first watch their assembly, because it's horrendous. It's always horrendous. You have a dream of what your film is, and you've made it, and then you watch it, and even if actually it's good, the assembly, you're so terrified at that point. And I know a fair amount of directors now, and they're all like, fuck, I can't stand it, I hate it. And so I feel like I wish that more directors would say that they're insecure about things, because that was one thing that stopped me for so long, was thinking that other people are so good at it that I couldn't possibly be that confident and be that good at it, at the job. So I just, I've always thought I'd like to have someone said that to me, half the time you're going to think you're terrible, and just try and get past that. And maybe you are terrible, but we'll see.
I'm going to have to point out now that the next three things are all adaptations as well. So
Yeah.
But the next one is Lean on Pete, which is based on a really lovely book by Willie Vlaughton, which you made in 2017. I don't know why I have this perception that that film is a little neglected or underseen, but do you share that? What are your feelings around it?
Yeah, it was. I think it's often the case, and I think I've made, I don't know, how many, 4 films?
4 films.
4 films. Yeah. And some 5. I've made 5 films.
Great Pete as well.
And I
Let's
guess
not
the
forget.
episode Looking is almost a movie, so we'll call it sort of whatever. So, and like, I've realised now that not everything you do is going to be seen in the same. Look, none of my things have been like box office smashes. Let's face it, but some things are just not going to be seen or talked about in the way that you want them to be talked about. And I'd come out of a weekend which people had talked about, and 45 years that people had talked about.
And Charlotte Rampling got an Oscar nomination.
She got an Oscar nomination. So we were at the Oscars, and it was all exciting. And then Looking came out, and good and bad, people were talking about it. So then when Lean on Pete came out, and I think because she'd been nominated for an Oscar out of 45 years, there was like an expectation that the next film would be, oh, this is going to be the film that then gets you more Oscars. I never thought it would. That was not the film, but the expectation is sort of there. And then I made the film, and I really loved the film, and I'm really proud of the film. And we played in Venice and did all the festival stuff, and people liked it. It was like it got really nice reviews, but I just couldn't get anybody to care about it really. And so it was a little bit disheartening at the time, and I get it. I think lots of filmmakers experience similar things. But you worked very hard on something, and you want it to be seen, even more than you want it to be liked. You kind of want it to be seen. I mean, you want it to be liked as well. That's not true. So it's both of those things. But so it was.
I love the film too, and it is personal in some ways. And we're going to play a clip from towards the end with Charlie Plummer and the horse Pete on their journey together.
You okay? I used to have a picture of my mom, but I threw it away one night when I was mad. Her name was Nancy, and she had real black hair, and she was real tall. When I was born, I stayed with her, but then she left me with my dad for a week and never came back. He said he didn't know why she left, but when I was little, I'd always ask about her. And he never say anything, but then one night when he was drunk, he told me that she was the moodiest person he's ever met. He said that she'd walk in the room and you'd swear she was a different person. That she'd be mean 1 hour and then nice the next. Sounds a bit like Del, if you ask me, right? And he said to me, Charlie, I ain't gonna lie to you. She hasn't called or sent a card, but I know deep down she loves you. She just fucked up in the head and likes to party too much. I know it's hard to hear, but it's a good thing she's gone. And he said to me, he said, I ain't worth shit, but I like being here with you. It's okay. I'm gonna get us out of here. I promise.
I want to talk about the theme of solitude a little bit and aloneness in your films, because
I know I seem so miserable when you watch these films.
I feel like your films zero in on their characters that are at their most alone quite often. The end of Weekend, when Russell and Glenn have said goodbye and he goes back to his apartment on his own, and Charlotte Rampling up in the attic poking around, and in this even he has Pete for the time being, but he seems so alone. Is that something that draws you to these books and these subjects?
Yeah, look, I'm definitely interested in aloneness and solitude and loneliness, and how how it's formed and how we soften it and how we try and rectify it. I think a lot of people, I'm assuming, feel a similar way, and loneliness is a part of everyone's lives. I think, for me personally, when you grow up as a gay kid, there's part of you that always feels separate and alone. So I think that infiltrates into everything. But it's more like I'm trying to find ways, and I think the new film does the same thing. And I think I'm exploring it more and more as I go on. It's like, how do we make sure that we care for the people that we love, or the people we care about? And I mean that on a small sense and even on a political sense, I guess, which Lean on Pete definitely has some kind of political overtones or undertones. And I think that's what I'm just trying to sort of understand and try and work out, because it's not about I want my characters to wallow in their loneliness, because I feel like they're all trying to get out of it, and they're trying to find ways to get out of it, and that is through connection, that is through love, that is through adventure. Like a Northwater, I still see as part of that lineage. It's still like a lonely, isolated person trying to make his way somehow. And so I think it's always interests me. I mean, I think, it's always going to be probably a theme of my work.
So a little bit more about making Lean on Pete, perhaps, because your first film in America with American actors, Steve Buscemi and Chloe Sevigny in those supporting roles. How did you go about that casting, and how does it work?
Yeah, I had an American casting director for that one, who'd done Looking, who I have an English casting director that does everything I do here, and an American one when I do stuff in America. And it was, again, it's hard when you're casting a kid, basically, because there aren't any famous kids really, and so there's always a pressure to cast, especially in America. There's every conversation you have is like, who can we get that's famous? And of course, how many famous 17-year-old kids are there? Timothy Chalamet, he's not 17?
Not anymore.
Still looks like he is. So it was, but I love Charlie Plummer in this. I think it's a beautiful,
amazing,
beautiful performance. And we sent it to some other people for some of the smaller roles, because this was with A24, this film, and they're still an indie studio, but they still want the film to have famous people in. And it's always that strange sense of even though the budget wasn't huge for this, I think it was 7 million, which is bigger than 45 Years was 1.5, I think. So it certainly had gone up in budget level, but you film in America and everything goes up in budget level. But you find the right people for the cast, and and then you just hope they're right, which I think they were in the film.
Yeah, and I agree with you about Charlie Plummer. He's wonderful.
He's brilliant. Yeah. I feel like for kids, I feel like he should be a really big actor by now, and for some reason he hasn't quite broken through. But I think he's a beautiful actor.
So The Northwater was the next one. Another fantastic novel, Ian McGuire book, really good. I'm curious though, a show of hands, who's seen The Northwater here? A smattering, probably.
It's more than I thought.
Yeah, it's fine. Definitely go and see it. This clip will really help you get enthused about it, I think. We're dealing with Colin Farrell and Jack O'Connell. They don't have too many scenes together in the show. It's a 5-part miniseries. We're on a whaling ship in the 1850s. And you, to shoot this, went up into the polar ice floes around Norway and had a very tricky time of it. But let's play the clip. What is happening here is essentially Jack O'Connell is getting increasingly suspicious that the sort of psychotic, murdering, rapist, paedophile on the boat is Colin Farrell. And by the end of the clip, you may have a view one way or the other. But yeah, let's have it.
I say things are about to change.
How do you mean?
Just what I said. Things are about to change. Why do you care so much about this cabin boy?
Because he was murdered.
Oh, I'd wager that's not it. I bet you've seen more than your share of butchery. Why does this one bother you so much?
I care because I do not wish to see an innocent man punished. Do you think it's fair that one man should suffer for another man's crime?
I'm guessing then you think McKendrick's not the culprit.
Do you think he killed the boy?
Isn't for me to say.
Isn't it?
It's no concern of mine.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
I'd say a dead cabin boy is the least of our fucking problems. The very least, I'd say.
So the sexual tension, it's pretty disturbing, and it only gets more so between those two. Was that something that you identified when you were reading the book? This, I can really make something here.
Yeah, it's so funny because, like, I think, look, not a huge amount of people saw the show. It was an amazing experience to make. I think it's super queer, the show, and like, I feel like if you're not explicit about that, people don't quite get it. But to me, it always felt like it's a love affair between these two people that can't actually fuck each other. So instead, one of them kills the other one by the end, stabs him in the throat with a big knife.
Spoiler, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So I always felt like that was what was bubbling underneath it. And it was my way to explore masculinity in a way that felt interesting to me. And a story about some guy pushing himself to the limits because he feels like he has to be that person when really he's not necessarily that person. And we had a great cast, like Stephen Graham was in it, Tom Courtenay, Peter Mullen, and we shot it all in Svalbard, like way up in the Arctic. We all lived on a boat for 6 weeks, like sailing around, jumping off into ice floes and trying to film on bits of ice. And I remember on the second day of the shoot, we were filming, there's a whale hunt in it. And we were like in this bay in Svalbard with a big ship, and I was in this like tender flying around with a camera guy trying to film 3 whale boats in the thing, and the wind was picking up, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? And I got back into the ship, and my partner was with me, he came with me, and I was like, I should not be here, this is a terrible idea. And it was probably the worst day of filming I've ever had. The wind, we got like about 1 minute of footage, the schedule was really tight, but then after that it settled in and I absolutely loved it. And I think what I try to do with each project is like, okay, what is the thing that feels like it's going to freak me out the most? And then I sort of try and do that, but still stay within things that I'm interested in. That doesn't mean doing a Marvel movie, which would freak me out, but I'm sure not going to do that. So, and that's kind of why I took it on. But it was a long process. It was half of it was during COVID, and it was complicated the way the show was set up, and it was a co-production, and then couldn't get sold to any major channel in America, so it ended up being on AMC Plus. And so again, it's like it's one of those projects that I'm really proud of, and I wish more people would see. But you know, that's sometimes how it like crumbles.
Do you think it was COVID partly that kind of?
It didn't help. Like they released it here. I never understand why they did it, but they bought The Terror.
Oh, The Terror, yeah.
And they put it on like 2 months before this show, and I was like, who wants to see 2 things set in whaling ships? So that kind of drove me completely crazy. And it, you know, it's just, you know.
And The Terror had been made like 2 or 3 years before, and they just decided to literally insert it before your show.
I also think that I'm probably not very good at television, because I feel like that in the end, like television has a very standard structure. Good television, and there's some great television out there, but it has a real sort of like structure to it. And I don't think I'm very good at like, or maybe I just don't want to do that kind of structure. So I think I would love to. I watched it once, all 5 hours in a row, and it felt great to me as a 5-hour movie. But I think for audiences, you know, they're at home, they're on the computer and doing other stuff, and I think TV is a certain thing, and I like doing TV, but I think it's a very, very different medium.
perhaps as you enter your kind of Martin Scorsese second half of your career, you'll get to make films that are 4 or 5 hours long, and that will just carry on.
I have a funny feeling that won't be happening.
We're going to now play the trailer for All of Us Strangers, but I also do want a hand count of who's seen it, who's seen the film. Lots of people have seen it. Okay, good. So you've managed to catch it. Great. We're going to have the trailer, and then we'll have a bit of time to talk about it before you guys can ask questions as well.
Hello.
Hi.
Saw you looking at me from the street. I'm assuming you're not with anyone. Never see you with anyone. This your mum and dad?
Yeah. They died just before I was 12. I'm trying to write about them at the moment.
How's it going?
Strangely. Hi.
Hi.
Is this real?
Does it feel real?
Our boys back home?
Our son. Look at you. You were just a boy. And now you're not.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't think that matters.
Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should.
I've always felt like a stranger in my own family.
Maybe I didn't love you
You're always scared of something.
quite as often as I could.
Always running away. Do you remember?
Little things I should have said and done. Sorry I never came in your room when you were crying. I never took the time.
It's funny, it doesn't take much
You were always on my mind.
to make you feel the way you felt. Back there again.
You think he'd like to be in love with him?
I'd always felt alone. This is a new feeling. You and me together into the world.
So people have been coming out of this film inconsolable, basically, from all kinds of angles and directions. Gay people,
Sorry about that.
straight people, people who've lost parents, people who maybe suffer with addiction. All these different aspects have kind of bowled people over. Have you been quite prepared for that? It feels like it feels like your most emotionally intense film, of course, but in fact the reactions have been pretty extraordinary, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, I did want to, I think after Northwater, you always make a decision to do something based on what you've done before, almost. So I think this was a choice to go smaller again, I guess, and more intimate, and tell a story about relationships. And I'd wanted to tell a story about parental relationships in relationship to romantic relationships for quite a long time. And I knew I wanted to make it emotional and sincere, actually, as well. And the script was quite a long, hard process. I mean, I don't know if anyone's read the novel, but it's very different from the novel. It's funny. It's an adaptation, but it's almost an adaptation of an idea, I think. And I knew I was going to put a lot of personal kind of feelings into the film. Well, obviously, it's not autobiographical, but it's from a personal place. And then you kind of hope that other people, it will resonate with them too. And I felt like it was, because even at script stage, people would read it and they'd really respond to it emotionally. And when we were shooting, they did. And then in the edit, I could see that it was affecting my editor and then affecting people in screenings. And then you start to worry because you're in the edit a long time and you lose your emotional reaction to it. So you're like, have I just destroyed it and taken away all of that emotion? So you have to kind of look at it slightly more intellectually and work out if what you're doing technically, I suppose, as a filmmaker, is still going to create the emotion, even if you're not feeling the emotion yourself anymore. And then, we premiered in Telluride, and I was apprehensive. I didn't know how people would take it. But it went down well, and people are really responding to it. And it's so interesting in relationship to having two projects that didn't sort of break through a bubble, let's call it. And this one feels like it is more. And it feels really good, and I'm glad that it's affecting people. And I come out of screenings and it is affecting people, and I speak to people who've seen it and they're still thinking about it a few days later. And you're right, I wanted it to be very specifically about an experience of a certain gay generation, which is not all queer or gay people. It's a very certain generation in terms of Adam's generation, which is my generation, which is a distinct thing. Kind of growing up in the middle of AIDS, not before, not after. Not that AIDS has gone, but you know what I'm saying, in terms of it not being a death sentence. And then at the same time, I wanted it to be more universal in terms of it being about, I guess, love in general and what we can do for each other to soften, again, pain, I suppose.
The conversations in it between the child and parents, but also between the two slightly differently, generationally different guys, are very, very fresh. I don't feel as though we've explored that in cinema yet. So that's one of the things that I valued about it enormously. I'm the same generation as you completely. And you've talked about how important it was, you thought, to cast Andrew, to cast a gay actor to play that character. But not so much the younger guy, perhaps more of a fluid sense of sexuality in the younger generation, maybe.
These kids,
yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah, which works perfectly, in part because the two of them together just electric. And was it clear you were going to get them both?
No, we'd got Andrew had agreed to do it, and I was really pleased about that. And you know, he's the same generation as us and has similar experiences about things. So he completely understood it. And Paul came later. He came actually on at the end. We cast Claire and Jamie first, and it was a hard casting process. Actually, it was strangely long. And it's not as if we went to lots of people or anything, but it was just, how on earth do I make sure that the parents make sense to be his parents, and they make sense as a couple as well, so you believe that? And how do you make sure that the Harry character, you believe that chemistry? But I did want it to be a different generation. I want there to be lots of generations in the story. You know, there's Harry, there's Adam, there's the parents, there's even talk of the parents' parents within the story. I think in many ways what I was trying to do was sort of say that pain, I guess is the best way to put it, gets stored in all of us, in all generations of everybody, and it's how on earth we try and excavate that in a productive way.
There's one aspect of the film that perhaps some people might not know, which is that you shot it in your childhood home. When did you decide to do that, and why?
When I was writing it, I think it's when you picture a house in your mind, it's often your first house. You know, that's other people's theories, and it gets imprinted into your brain. So when I was writing, it just was my first house I lived in. Although I lived in somewhere else just for a year, but this was the house I lived until I was I think it was 6 or 7 or something like that. But it was still so prominent in my mind as a house, and so I went back down to where I used to live, which is Sanderstead, which is what's in the story. Went to the house, hadn't been there for 40 years or something, whatever it's been, and we knocked on the door, and he said, he worked out we could film there, and I kind of feel like I wanted, it's about someone going back in time essentially to understand things and to reconnect with his past, and so I sort of wanted to do the same thing. And again, it's like making the crew go to Svalbard instead of doing it on a soundstage. I feel like every project I need to push myself in a way that feels uncomfortable, emotionally uncomfortable almost. And I knew with this I had to get to a space that was emotionally uncomfortable. And I think it helped everybody. I think it helped the actors, because I think we spent a lot of time just sharing stuff about being a kid, being a parent, all of the things that the film is about. Because it's not just about being a kid, it's about being a parent too. It's very important to me that it is about parenting. And so, I don't know, I think in the end it really helped. It was a strange experience, definitely, being in that place and redesigning it to look like my house, and, it was strange.
It's probably my last question, but you mentioned some of the technical aspects of the film, and I didn't know until I read up about it, about how you shot the high-rise scenes. Again, people might not know this, but I was so dazzled by the kind of urban cityscapes that you created, and you had to go about that in a very particular way that was not exactly naturalistic. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, I wanted to shoot in real locations, but then no one lets you film in them in those towers. They're all run by like massive conglomerates, and I knew I wanted to be on the edge of London, or some part of London that I like the idea that he'd moved to London, was in London, but was still somehow on the edge of the city, not fully being able to embrace something. We tried to get a place in Vauxhall, which I think is just a clusterfuck of weirdness, that place now. I don't know what has happened there. It's like these empty blocks of like, but no one would let us in. They wouldn't even sit in the door. No one would let us into the buildings. So then we tried Stratford, which is where we shot the exterior, and we shot all of the plates. So we shot plates of the view that would have been. We got in for like 2 days to be able to shoot plates. And then we had a massive LED wall that projected those plates on a built set. And I really like that. I didn't want to ever do green screen. I'd done some green screen before, like on the boat, which of course you had to do in North Water because we had to, but I don't like it. I don't like what it does for the actors. I want the actors to feel like they're in the environment. And the great thing about that is you walk into the set and you're like, I'm really like 20 floors up, because it looks so real when you're on the set. And then you suddenly see someone cleaning the window outside and like changing lights, and you're like, it's really disconcerting. But I also wanted it to look slightly unnaturalistic from the very beginning. I felt like the film would not work if it feels absolutely grounded in reality from the beginning. So no one's on their phone. There's no phones. It's sort of the real world, but not. And I felt like where the film goes to, I wanted you to suspend disbelief from a very early stage in order to make the central idea of the parents coming back to life again work without them feeling, it's just ghosts. So that was always the plan.
It almost has a post-apocalyptic vibe at the start. You're like, where is everyone?
Yeah, at some point we had some music on that I loved. It was, I don't know if anyone knows Caterina Barbieri, she's a musician. But it was so intense. And we showed it to some people and I was like, is it the end of the world? Is that what's happened? And I was like, I don't think that's the vibe we're trying to go for. So, and it is, we worked a long time on this. We previewed, which is something I've never done before. I've never done a preview. I don't really want to ever do one again. They're an interesting process. You show them to lots of random people and they watch it, and 15 of them stand up when they start having sex and leave the cinema. Which is like, that's interesting. So it's a fascinating thing, but it was a good process. Searchlight and Film 4 were actually really, really supportive of the process. They never tried to push it, because I was worried that this could end up being pushed into far more genre territory, and they were really very accommodating about wanting to make the film that I wanted to make. No, I think there's a lot. I mean, sometimes I think there's too much of people looking in mirrors in my films. I notice every time they're looking in the mirror again. It's a lot of mirror looking. So that always worries me a little bit. But I think for this, it felt really, really important. It felt like there's something about taking it essentially from a queer perspective, let's say. There's something about how you portray yourself in the world can be very different to who you are. And I think that's what Adam is doing. And so I love this idea of reflecting himself back to him and how that changes throughout the story. So as it kind of gets more complicated and he's feeling more pain and this stuff is coming up, he's seeing that reflected back to him. And I think we did a lot of work, the elevator, for example, that's a complicated set build of a double, I don't know, ruin the magic, but of you have double-sided glass so you can shoot through it so you don't see the camera, and I knew I wanted kind of these infinity reflections, and there's even a clip of the film they're watching at one point later on is Watcher in the Woods, which is an old Disney film, and I got a text actually, sometimes name dropping now, from Edgar Wright, had seen the film last night. He's like, Watcher in the Woods, I love that film. But it's true, and there's something about mirrors that has always intrigued me, because it gives a kind of, there's something false about it. And also in relationship to time, like I'm sure anybody that's not 20 anymore, they suddenly catch sight of their reflection and they're like, I don't understand what that is. What is that thing staring back at me? And I felt that was actually kind of interesting for this, because even when I think if everyone now imagined their parents, they don't necessarily imagine their parents as they look now. They imagine their parents as they looked when they were 10, 20, whatever it is. There's a vision in your mind. And I feel like that feels really true. And I feel like there's an element of like time travel in this movie. And I feel like that's what memory is just time travel. And so, I don't know. There's something about reflections that I love. It's a little bit. I like in 45. I mean, Weekend's got no coverage. Every single scene is one shot. There's not a single bit of coverage in that film, I don't think, unless I cheated at one point. I don't think there's any coverage. And I wanted to sort of bring that into 45 years, but I knew it needed a bit more coverage. And there's something about just holding the camera on the person that you're not expecting the camera to be on that reveals something. And I think, like, whether it was Tom Courtenay or Charlotte Rampling, they are amazing actors who are giving something really subtle. And I think it's what you talked about before with that first clip of Weekend, that you're seeing these details. And I love seeing those details. And it makes the scene, to me, surprising. And it also creates a sort of like some kind of tension somehow, that you're expecting something to cut and you're expecting to see a reaction, but you don't see that reaction. There's something interesting to me in that. And and even in All of Us Strangers, I'm very... because there's coverage in All of Us Strangers, definitely. But it's like I knew that certain scenes wouldn't have any. So there's a scene in bed with the mum and Adam, which is one shot, and we shot on film, and it's 5.5 minutes, the shot, and a roll of film was about 5.5 minutes, and we kept running out of film before the shot had ended, so it was infuriating. But I knew going into that, I just wanted that to be one shot. And I have my own like reasons emotionally why I feel like it needs to be sustained. And then other times I want to cut. So I'm pretty sure going in what it is I want to do in terms of... But you change your mind sometimes, because sometimes the performance gives you something different. Yeah, they're really pre-planned. So they're definitely written into... I mean, not all the time, but they are written into the script. Like going back to Weekend, John Grant's songs were written into the script. And in this film... And in 45 years, the end songs are written into the script. In fact, lots of it's the way for me to feel the film is through the music. And with this one, it was interesting with All of Us Strangers, because I knew I wanted it to be pop music from a time that he would have loved and listened to when he was a kid. And they are all songs I loved as a kid. Like I bought the Frankie Goes to Hollywood album. I loved the Pet Shop Boys. And I think, in a strange sense, I thought about a lot with this film. It's like pop music for kids. Has a really important effect, because we can't articulate our feelings and we can't articulate our longings and what we need from life. But if I look back at the songs I loved, which was The Power of Love, I used to sing it, I used to listen to it over and over again, or the Pet Shop Boys, they are saying something to me even before I kind of knew who I was. And I think, pop music really has the ability to do that. And again, I can listen to a song. I mean, I can't listen to these songs now because I've just heard them too many times. I sort of ruined them for myself. But still now, if I listen to the House Martins, right, which I loved as a kid, I can feel like I'm back there again listening to Build or Flag Day or whatever the songs I love by the House Martins. And same with all those other bands. So it's just, it's really important to me, that kind of stuff.
And let's mention the very end of 45 years as well. The song, The Needle Drop There, which was just extraordinary. Yeah,
I mean, that was it. I mean, that song, Something Gets in Your Eyes, has been used in a lot of films as well. So I was like, oh, God, this is going to have to work.
But it works for that context.
It works for that context. I love songs that sort of, I always listen to lyrics really strongly. And that song's really interesting because the lyrics are quite depressing in Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. It's a strange choice for a romantic song that you would have at a party, but people do play that. So I sometimes love that juxtaposition of what it does, and I like what the lyrics do in All of Us Strangers. They're saying something to the story that the characters can't always articulate. Yeah, I did take a lot from it, and not just editing, and all of those jobs in the industry, actually, whether I've been on set, and I was a runner and did all those kind of jobs, and I was a third AD and did all these things. And they all have definitely helped me, just in a basic how to be on set and how to talk to people on set, and all those kind of things have come from that. But editing, you just see, I mean, a lot of footage gets shot, and you're trying to work out what it is that is the key to that footage, and what is the emotional beat that is interesting, and what is the most authentic version, because actors are very good, but there's usually the moment that you feel is the key, and you just have to be super aware of that and not get bored of it. And when I was in editing and as an assistant, you would see the changes that people would make to cuts, and sometimes you would think that's a mistake. They've just seen it too many times, and they need to remember what they loved about that they first, when they first saw the footage. So I'm very aware of that going forward in editing, and also just you hone, I suppose, your own idea of editing and the style of editing that you want to do. Weekend is not cut like Gladiator. And that doesn't mean I don't love Gladiator, because I do love Gladiator, but it's like you work out what is the style that suits the films that you're making. I just think that there's, for me, at the core of the film is that he has not been able to process his grief. And I don't just mean the death of his parents. I think, there are a lot of things that we grieve in our lives that we lose. A nostalgia for our youth that didn't quite exist in a certain way, or things that you've lost. And I think he's not been able to process that. And I think a lot of us store all of our anxieties in our bodies, essentially. Like when I went and shot back in the house, all my eczema started coming up again. And I was like, what the fuck? Why am I I haven't had eczema for a long, long time. And I think there was some weird thing that happens to your body. And so we wanted that to be part of the story, I think, that, that it is the emotional unfolding of the story is affecting him physically. The loneliness question, definitely. I think this is a film about that, but I think it's actually a film about a way out of it rather than a film about it. So I feel like that is what it's about. And it was cathartic for me, I think, definitely. And, I'm not an incredibly lonely person now. I don't want to think that I'm wallowing around in my bed every day, because I'm not. But I feel like that is what the film is addressing. In terms of what you understand from the film, in terms of what is happening plot-wise, we thought a lot about it, but it's about what you just... I'm happy for the audience. Look, I think there's a logic to the story that works. There's also, I don't care if you don't care about that logic. So for me, there was also an emotional logic that was more important. So if you leave the cinema feeling something, which I think can still be conflicted, that feeling. I know already that people are feeling different things from it. Some find it devastating, some find it hopeful. I have theories on that, but I won't go into what that is. But I'm happy for that. You make a film, and then it's the audience's film to take on. You want it to go into them somehow. I actually just really like adaptation. There's lots of things. I get sent a bunch of stuff. Most things I would never want to adapt. I think lots of things are great as novels, and some things don't work as films. But if I can find something, there's some strange, the writer of Strangers. I've never met him. I've never spoken to him. He's 80-year-old man, lives in Japan, and this is a very different version of that story. So it's almost like an original thing, but it's not. But somehow we're connected, and I sort of like that somehow. So that there's some strange magic that happens when I feel like I'm adapting someone else's work. So I really enjoy that. Was that the question?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. So there's in terms of other books, there are other things. There's another thing that I've tried to adapt for a long time, which I think might happen, which is a short story by Colm Tóibín. He's one of my favourite writers, Irish writer. Can't get away from the Irish, honestly. There's a lot of Irish people in my life. But it depends. If I have my adaptations are usually, I think Lean on Pete was probably quite the closest that is to the source material, and maybe North Water. They're both quite close to the source material. Or maybe I've just got no original ideas.
Whenever I know that you're adapting something, I immediately just go and read the book, and it's always worth doing. Like the North Water is a phenomenal book and a phenomenal show. I thank all of you for your questions, and I tell you all to go and see Lean on Pete and track down the North Water.
It's on BBC iPlayer.
There we go. But
if you don't see it, they might take it off. So keep watching it.
And if you don't have a chance to see All of Us Strangers during the festival, it comes out in January, and there will be a big fuss made over it then as well. But could you just join me in thanking Andrew for his time today?
Thank you very much. Thanks. Cheers.